The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has deep historical roots. It stretches back for many decades. The core issues involve land, sovereignty, and self-determination. Disagreements over borders and the status of Jerusalem remain unresolved. Numerous attempts at peace have unfortunately failed to bring lasting stability. This long history of unresolved grievances forms the backdrop to the current devastating events. The cycle of violence has continued, affecting generations of both Palestinians and Israelis. Understanding this protracted struggle is crucial to comprehending the intensity and complexity of the present crisis. The world has watched this conflict ebb and flow, but the current phase has reached an alarming new peak of destruction and human suffering, particularly in the Gaza Strip. The recent escalation began dramatically on October 7, 2023. Hamas-led militants launched a significant attack on southern Israel. During this assault, an estimated 1,139 people were killed in Israel. More than 200 individuals, including civilians and soldiers, were taken captive and brought into Gaza. In response, Israel initiated an extensive military operation in the Gaza Strip. This operation aimed to dismantle Hamas and secure the return of the hostages. The immediate aftermath saw intense bombardment and the beginning of a ground offensive. The scale of Israel's response quickly led to widespread international concern over the humanitarian consequences for the people living in the densely populated Gaza Strip. As of June 2025, the conflict continues with unrelenting ferocity. The Gaza Strip has been subjected to nearly 2 years of devastating military action. The humanitarian situation has deteriorated to catastrophic levels. Millions of Palestinians face displacement, starvation, and the constant threat of violence. Infrastructure, including homes, hospitals, and schools, has suffered extensive damage or complete destruction. The fabric of society in Gaza is being torn apart by the prolonged warfare. International efforts to mediate a ceasefire and deliver sufficient aid have repeatedly faltered, leaving the civilian population in a state of perpetual crisis and despair. This essay will explore the multifaceted dimensions of the current Gaza crisis. It will detail the severe humanitarian impact on the civilian population. It will examine the serious accusations leveled against Israel regarding its conduct of the war, particularly concerning civilian casualties and attacks on aid infrastructure. Furthermore, the essay will discuss restrictions placed on journalists in the West Bank, the controversial growth of Israel's military technology industry amidst the conflict, and the varied international responses. These responses include accusations of grave international crimes, such as genocide, and the perspectives of impacted Palestinian communities will be central to this examination. The aim is to provide a comprehensive overview of a tragedy that demands global attention and action. Gaza's government media office has made grave accusations against Israel. They claim Israel has committed a horrific, intentionally repeated crime. The office alleges that Israel lured starving Palestinians to aid centers specifically run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. After attracting them to these locations, Israeli forces then allegedly attacked, resulting in significant loss of life. According to these accusations, this tactic has been used multiple times. The claim is that 102 Palestinians were killed in such incidents over a period of just 8 days. These are serious charges that suggest a deliberate targeting of vulnerable civilians seeking essential sustenance in a war-torn environment. A recent devastating incident occurred in southern Gaza's Rafah governorate. At least 27 Palestinians were reportedly killed in an alleged attack on an aid center there. The enclave's health ministry confirmed these fatalities. This event is cited as the latest example in a pattern of attacks on locations where humanitarian aid is distributed. Such attacks not only result in immediate casualties, but also create an environment of extreme fear. This fear can deter desperate people from seeking life-saving assistance. The repetition of these incidents raises profound concerns about the safety of civilians and the protection of humanitarian operations within the Gaza Strip during this protracted conflict. The overall Palestinian casualty figures paint a grim picture of the conflict's human cost. According to Gaza's health ministry, Israel's war on Gaza has killed at least 54,510 Palestinians. Additionally, 124,901 individuals have been wounded. Reuters, citing Gaza health officials, also reported that over 48,000 Palestinians had been killed. Separately, Amnesty International, in a report covering events up to October 7, 2024, stated that over 42,000 Palestinians had been killed. a figure which included 13,300 children with over 97,000 injured. These staggering numbers highlight the immense scale of death and injury inflicted upon the Palestinian population in Gaza. The significance of these accusations regarding attacks on aid centers cannot be overstated. Targeting locations designated for humanitarian aid distribution directly exacerbates an already dire crisis. It deprives a starving population of essential resources like food and water. Such actions, if proven, could constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law. International law specifically protects civilians and humanitarian relief efforts during armed conflict. The deliberate targeting of aid infrastructure or personnel is considered a war crime. These allegations, therefore, demand thorough and impartial investigation to establish accountability and ensure that such tragic events are not repeated. The people of Gaza live in a constant state of terror and profound loss. Ordinary families are caught in the crossfire, their lives shattered by the ongoing violence. The accusations of being lured to aid centers only to be attacked add a cruel dimension to their suffering. Imagine the desperation of a parent trying to find food for their children, only to face death where they hoped for relief. This is the harrowing reality for many. Homes have been reduced to rubble, and the streets once filled with life are now landscapes of destruction. The search for safety is a daily, often futile endeavor for countless Gazans. The discovery of mass graves, such as the one found beside Shifa Hospital, speaks volumes about the scale of the tragedy. Palestinian families have been forced to exhume dozens of bodies. Gaza's civil defense reported that 48 bodies were unearthed from a grave site that contained over 180 bodies in total. These grim discoveries are not just statistics, they represent individuals with families, histories, and dreams. For the survivors, these sites are painful reminders of their loss and the brutality of the conflict. The process of identifying loved ones from such graves is an agonizing experience, compounding the trauma already endured by the community. Daily life under bombardment is an unrelenting nightmare. In North Gaza, the population faces starvation, forced displacement, and the constant threat of annihilation. Relentless shelling and airstrikes make every moment precarious. Access to basic necessities like clean water, food, and medical supplies is severely restricted. Children grow up amidst the sounds of explosions, their childhood stolen by war. The psychological toll of living under such conditions is immense. Families huddle together, hoping to survive another night, another day, unsure if help will ever reach them or if the violence will ever cease. The psychological trauma inflicted on the population, especially children, is profound and will have long-lasting effects. Many have witnessed unspeakable horrors, including the deaths of family members and friends. The constant exposure to violence and loss creates deep emotional scars. Amnesty International's report titled, "You Feel Like You Are Subhuman: Israel's Genocide Against Palestinians in Gaza" captures the dehumanizing impact of the conflict. This feeling of being stripped of one's humanity pervades the experiences of many Palestinians. Rebuilding lives and communities will require not only physical reconstruction, but also extensive support for mental health and healing from this collective trauma. While global attention is predominantly focused on Gaza, the situation in the occupied West Bank has also deteriorated significantly. Tensions and violence have escalated in parallel with the war in Gaza. Israeli settler attacks on Palestinians have reportedly increased. The Israeli military maintains a strong presence and restrictions on Palestinian movement are common. This environment creates significant challenges for those trying to document and report on events unfolding in the territory. The West Bank, though geographically separate from Gaza, is deeply intertwined in the broader conflict and its consequences for the Palestinian population living under occupation. A concerning incident highlighted these challenges on Monday, June 2, 2025. Israeli soldiers barred journalists from entering Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank. The journalists were part of a planned tour. This tour was organized by the directors of the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land. The film itself focuses on the very issue of Israeli settler attacks against Palestinians and the displacement of communities in the Masafer Yatta region. Denying access to journalists attempting to cover such sensitive and critical issues raises serious questions about transparency and freedom of the press in the occupied territories. The Israeli military cited a military order as the reason for denying passage to the journalists. They were specifically blocked from entering 2 Palestinian villages. The journalists had intended to interview residents in these villages. Their goal was to gather first-hand accounts about the increasing settler violence they face. Such restrictions prevent independent verification of events and limit the flow of information to the outside world. When journalists are prevented from doing their work, it becomes more difficult to hold perpetrators of violence accountable and to understand the full scope of human rights abuses occurring on the ground. These restrictions on press access have significant implications. They directly impact the world's understanding of the complex and often brutal reality in the West Bank. By controlling who can report and what can be seen, authorities can shape the narrative of the conflict. This silencing of storytellers is a powerful tool. It can obscure the experiences of affected communities and hinder efforts to document human rights violations. An informed global public is essential for promoting accountability and peace. Therefore, ensuring press freedom in all areas of the conflict, including the West Bank, is of paramount importance for justice and truth. Section 5. Gaza's deepening wound, a humanitarian catastrophe. The humanitarian situation in North Gaza has reached an almost unimaginable nadir. The population there is confronting widespread starvation. They have been repeatedly displaced, forced to flee their homes with little more than the clothes on their backs. The area endures relentless bombardment from air, land, and sea. This constant violence makes any semblance of normal life impossible. The struggle for survival is a daily reality, with families desperate to find food, water, and shelter amidst the ruins. The international community has repeatedly warned of famine-like conditions, yet the suffering continues to intensify for hundreds of thousands of people. Severe restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza are a primary driver of this crisis. Convoys carrying essential supplies face long delays and denials of access. The amount of aid reaching those in need is a mere fraction of what is required to sustain the population. This restricted flow of assistance directly contributes to the worsening conditions of starvation and disease. Humanitarian organizations have consistently called for unimpeded and safe access to all parts of Gaza. They emphasize that without it, the crisis will only deepen, leading to more preventable deaths and suffering among the besieged civilian population. The destruction of healthcare infrastructure across Gaza has crippled the ability to provide medical care. Hospitals have been damaged or destroyed by shelling, and many are no longer functional. Those that remain operational are overwhelmed with casualties and lack essential medicines, equipment, and fuel. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies is evacuating around 50 patients daily from Gaza. However, an estimated 25,000 patients are in urgent need of medical evacuation due to the collapsed healthcare system. This inability to treat the sick and injured adds another layer of tragedy to the ongoing humanitarian disaster. The humanitarian crisis is inextricably linked to the ongoing military actions. The intensity of the conflict makes it incredibly dangerous and often impossible for aid workers to operate safely. Delivering aid and providing medical care under constant threat of bombardment is a monumental challenge. The destruction of roads and infrastructure further complicates logistics. Until there is a cessation of hostilities and guaranteed safe access, the efforts of humanitarian organizations will remain severely hampered. The civilian population of Gaza will continue to bear the brunt of this devastating conflict, caught between the violence and the lack of essential life-saving support. Section 6. The Technology of Conflict. Israel's wartime military tech surge. Israel has long been recognized as a significant player in the global military technology industry. The nation has cultivated a reputation for innovation in defense systems, cybersecurity, and surveillance technologies. Israeli companies are prominent exporters of advanced weaponry and security solutions worldwide. This industry is a critical component of Israel's economy and its national security strategy. The development of cutting-edge military technology has been a consistent focus for both the government and private sector enterprises within the country for many decades, often driven by its own security concerns and experiences in conflict. Recent reports suggest that the ongoing war on Gaza has in effect turbocharged Israel's military tech sector. There are claims that new weapons and sophisticated surveillance systems are being tested extensively in the context of the Gaza conflict. These technologies are then marketed and sold globally, often promoted as battle-tested or combat-proven. This dynamic means that the conflict zone in Gaza can be perceived by some as a real-world laboratory for military innovation. The performance of these systems against Palestinian targets and infrastructure becomes a selling point for international buyers, further fueling the industry's growth. Indeed, Israel's role as a global arms innovator appears to have deepened significantly since the escalation of October 7, 2023. The demands of the current conflict have likely spurred further development and refinement of existing technologies. It has also potentially created opportunities for new types of military hardware and software. The intense urban warfare environment in Gaza, coupled with the extensive use of surveillance and precision-guided munitions, provides a unique, albeit tragic, context for demonstrating the capabilities of these advanced systems. This increased visibility and perceived effectiveness can translate into increased international sales and collaborations for Israeli defense companies. This situation, however, raises profound ethical considerations. The idea that a devastating conflict, with its immense human suffering, can simultaneously serve as a catalyst for industrial growth is deeply troubling to many observers. Critics argue that it creates a perverse incentive structure where conflict can be seen as beneficial to certain sectors. The cycle of developing, testing, and selling weaponry honed in active war zones like Gaza draws international condemnation. It highlights the complex and often uncomfortable relationship between warfare, technological advancement, and the global arms trade, particularly when Palestinian lives are directly impacted by these innovations. Section 7. Global Condemnation, Accusations of Grave International Crimes. UN-backed human rights experts have leveled serious accusations against Israel. They have highlighted what they term disproportionate violence against women and children in Gaza. These experts, mandated by the Human Rights Council, have expressed grave concerns over the high number of female and child casualties. They point to patterns of harm that suggest a lack of adherence to principles of distinction and proportionality in warfare. The focus on women and children underscores the particularly vulnerable position of these groups in the conflict. Their suffering has become a central point of international scrutiny and condemnation. Furthermore, these UN experts have alleged instances of sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinian detainees. These are extremely serious claims. They include reports of forced public stripping and other forms of sexual assault. The experts have gone so far as to accuse Israel of using sexual violence as a war strategy in Gaza. They also highlighted the systematic destruction of women's healthcare facilities. This destruction, they argue, includes measures specifically intended to prevent births among the Palestinian population. Such allegations point towards deeply disturbing practices that would constitute severe violations of international law and human rights. The UN experts have stated that Israel is committing genocidal acts in Gaza. This particular accusation is linked to the widespread destruction of Gaza's reproductive health care facilities. They argue that these actions, aimed at preventing Palestinian births, fall under the scope of acts prohibited by the Genocide Convention. However, it is important to note that these specific experts stopped short of formally accusing Israel of committing the crime of genocide in its entirety at that point, focusing on specific genocidal acts. This nuanced but damning assessment adds significant weight to the international pressure on Israel regarding its conduct in the war. Israel has consistently rejected these accusations from UN bodies. The Israeli government has refused to cooperate with the UN-backed Human Rights Council, accusing it of inherent anti-Israel bias. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed the UN experts' report on genocidal acts and sexual violence. He characterized it as both biased and anti-Semitic. Israel's permanent mission to the UN in Geneva also issued denials. They specifically refuted accusations of forced public stripping and sexual assault, stating that IDF policies strictly prohibit such misconduct. This stark disagreement highlights the deep divisions and contentious nature of investigating alleged war crimes. Section 8. The world responds, calls for justice and accountability. Amnesty International has reached a damning conclusion regarding Israel's actions. The human rights organization stated unequivocally that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. This assertion is detailed in their comprehensive report, titled, "You Feel Like You Are Subhuman, Israel's Genocide Against Palestinians in Gaza." The report meticulously documents various acts prohibited under the Genocide Convention. These include widespread killings, the causing of serious bodily or mental harm, and the deliberate infliction of conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. Consequently, Amnesty International has called for an immediate halt to all arms transfers to Israel. In a significant international legal development, South Africa has brought a genocide case against Israel before the International Court of Justice. The ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. South Africa's application argues that Israel's actions in Gaza violate its obligations under the Genocide Convention. This case has drawn global attention, representing a state-level challenge to Israel's conduct of the war. The proceedings at the ICJ are closely watched, as its rulings, while not always enforceable, carry considerable moral and legal weight in the international community. This move signifies a growing international effort to use legal mechanisms to address the crisis. The International Criminal Court has also taken action. The ICC prosecutor issued applications for arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister. The warrants are for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in the Gaza Strip. Both Israeli leaders strongly deny these charges. The ICC's intervention marks another critical avenue for potential accountability for individuals. Amnesty International has further urged the ICC to consider adding the crime of genocide to its ongoing investigation into the situation in Palestine, reflecting the severity of the allegations being made by various human rights bodies. These international actions have elicited responses from various actors. Hamas, for instance, reacted to the UN report detailing sexual violence against Palestinians by calling for the prosecution of Israeli leaders. They urged international bodies to hold those responsible accountable. Domestically, the political landscape in Israel also shows signs of reacting to these pressures, though often through consolidation. For example, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar's New Hope party signed an agreement to merge with Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party. Such moves can be interpreted in part as efforts to present a united front amidst increasing international condemnation and legal challenges. Section 9, Conclusion. An urgent plea for humanity and resolution. The humanitarian impact on Gaza's civilian population has been nothing short of catastrophic. As of June 2025, tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed, with many more injured. The figures provided by Gaza's Health Ministry, Reuters, and Amnesty International, while slightly varying, all point to an immense loss of life, including a shocking number of children. Beyond the casualties, the population endures widespread displacement, starvation, and the near-total destruction of essential infrastructure. Homes, hospitals, schools, and sanitation systems lie in ruins. The daily reality for Gazans is a desperate struggle for survival in an environment of unrelenting violence and deprivation. Serious accusations regarding Israel's conduct of the war continue to mount. These include the alleged targeting of aid centers, as reported by Gaza's government media office, and the broader concerns about disproportionate force. International bodies like the UN and respected organizations such as Amnesty International have presented findings that suggest potential war crimes and even genocidal acts. The specific allegations of systematic destruction of healthcare, including reproductive health facilities, and the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, are particularly grave. These claims demand rigorous, impartial international investigation and cannot be ignored by the global community. The crisis in Gaza and the accompanying allegations have profound implications for international law and the protection of human rights. The principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in armed conflict appear to have been repeatedly violated. The restrictions on humanitarian aid and the attacks on aid workers and distribution points further undermine fundamental legal and moral obligations. If accountability is not pursued for all parties involved, it risks eroding the very foundations of the international legal order designed to prevent such atrocities and protect civilians in wartime. The credibility of international justice mechanisms is at stake. Therefore, there is an urgent and undeniable need for meaningful global intervention. This intervention must prioritize the immediate protection of civilians in Gaza. It must ensure unimpeded and sufficient humanitarian access to all who need it. Furthermore, the international community must fully support impartial investigations into all alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity by all actors. Ultimately, a just and lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the only way to prevent future tragedies. This requires renewed diplomatic efforts, a commitment to upholding international law, and a recognition of the equal rights and dignity of all people in the region.